Hi everyone, this is Austin Carty. I'm the pastor of Boulevard Baptist Church in Anderson, South Carolina. And I come to you today with what I hope is a word of encouragement. And it's a word of encouragement that picks up where I left off in a video recording I did on Saturday, which was on the connective power of prayer. I mentioned that I'd been reflecting on that because of the outpouring of support and the notes that I received from so many last week about my son Whit and how in his sickness that folks were praying for him. First, I'm happy to report that he is almost back to his usual self. His fever is gone. His cough is nearly gone, and his energy is back up. And I have no doubt that before I finish this recording, you will hear him screaming or laughing in the background, along with my other children. That is just the reality of recording these things from home. But so in thinking about how moved I was to receive notes from so many different people about how they were praying for my son Whit, so many of those from folks that I haven't heard from in ages, in some cases 25 years. It made me think about how prayer not only connects us across physical distances, but connects us across spans of time as well. Uh, and, and and I really thought about that a lot. And maybe that seems really obvious to you, and maybe as a pastor that ought to be obvious to me. But it struck me in a way that I hadn't really thought about it before. And in fact, it made me think about the notion of quantum entanglement, or at least made me think about it in the little way that I understand how that is, or how that works and what that is. But the basic idea there is that two particles separated literally the distance of the entire expanding universe were one particle to be acted upon, the particle to which it is mysteriously entangled receives an immediate effect, and vice versa. And how this is, we don't know. I certainly don't know. But our best physicists tell us that it is, in fact, true. And I think there's something really beautiful about this. And I think that if we look at it carefully, it has a deep implication for what happens when we're praying for one another. I think in many ways this is resonant with what the Apostle Paul is saying when he writes to the church in Rome, that we often don't know what it is that we should be praying for. But if we just commit ourselves to prayer, then God intercedes for us, that God's Spirit intercedes for us. The text says, with words too deep to utter. That's a beautiful turn of phrase, and I think that if ever there were a time where we need to be able to trust in our capacity to pray for one another with words that are too deep to utter, now's the time. For everyone who was praying by name for my family and for my son last week, I have no doubt that there were legions who were praying but have never met me or my family or my son, but whose prayers had some kind of effect on my son, in the same way that quantum entanglement works, in the same way that the Apostle Paul describes prayer working. I believe this is true, and I think now it's a more important time than ever to believe this to be true, because there's such deep needs in the world right now. There are folks literally dying around the world right now because of this virus. There are people, if not dying from it, who are deeply ill with it. There are people who, because of the isolation that it's caused so many of us to undergo, people that are feeling profound loneliness. There are people that this pandemic has already caused to lose jobs. There are people terrified that they will soon be losing jobs. Um, the implications that this moment has, and the needs um, that it lends, the need for prayer that this moment lends itself to, are just too vast to go into. And then sometimes it can feel like just praying in a blanket way for these things, for those facing economic insecurity, for those who've lost their jobs, for those who are sick, for those who have just lost loved ones. If we don't know those people by name, sometimes that can just feel like such an impersonal prayer that it almost has no meaning. And so my encouragement tonight would be to keep praying nonetheless. Pray for those we know. Pray for those that we know, though we haven't spoken to in years. Those we haven't seen in such long times. But pray also for those simply in the categories that we know people need prayer. And don't be overwhelmed by the fact that we don't have names and faces for those things, because God's Spirit does intercede in ways too deep for utterances. We are entangled in ways that we simply cannot fathom. So my encouragement tonight, in these days to come, carve out 5 minutes of uninterrupted prayer time. Pray for those you know by name. Pray for those needs you know by their particular needs. And then just pray for our world. This is an opportunity for us to remember just how deeply connected we really are as human beings. I invite you to pray for 5 minutes each day. May it be so. I promise I'll be joining with you. Perhaps we are entangled, you and I, in a mysterious way that we will never know. Amen.